This conference will now be recorded.
Welcome to the October 28th meeting of the Board of Finance. You've now been called to order. Some of us are online and some of us are here and some of us are absent, but the secretary is aware. So at this point, Kathleen, I know you like the Pledge of Allegiance. I give you a chance to make sure you do it upright.
Thank you. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, thank you so very much. Minutes of the previous meeting. Can I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
All right, we have a second. We have the motion. Does anyone care to comment on them in any way, shape, or form?
I would like to comment.
All right.
So I had plenty of time to review these minutes this weekend. And it struck me, there's a few things I have questions about, but they're nothing huge. But when we have the minutes and there's questions that are brought up in it, I don't feel like we always go back to those questions. So there's a question about the lien. I don't know if you got an answer on that. I had a question about capital project completion, the way that the transactions are handled. There was a question about the Little League and then something about Fisher Drive. And I know Fisher Drive's still on the agenda. We'll talk about that. But I just feel like sometimes there's little tiny things on there and I don't know about follow-up.
Okay. Technically, that's beyond the scope of to approve the minutes.
Right.
But we can make sure that we try and do that under
Business, would it be? Or-
I would say communications from board members, so that would pick up things that were
Okay.
not on the agenda.
All right, thank you.
So
Just
like
wanted to know how
for
to do that.
example, the lien, I assume we're talking about the
Avon Place.
the Avon Wood, Avon Place lien. So we can certainly do that.
Sure, thank you.
All right. All in favor? Aye.
I'm just abstaining because I wasn't here. I know I could vote, but
I understand. You don't have to vote.
Yeah.
How about Micah?
I didn't hear Micah. Oh, that's an aye. Got it. Thank you, Micah. All right. Now, do we have communications from the public? You're here and you're the public?
Do I get more than 3 minutes tonight?
Well, we'll be flexible because you're the only person here, but you won't get half an hour.
No.
Take one.
Okay.
James Fitzgerald, Kennington Road. Thank you for allowing me to speak tonight. I appreciate the time. I just want to circle back on previous topic, and a previous topic had to do with the budget and the referendums. And I'm only going to refer to it as information that was not accurate on the Board of Ed website on their budgets, which I discovered when I was trying to do my own analysis. And I had sent a message off to their message center, which doesn't have an email, but I did get a response back from Dr. Carnamola. And that was that they made a mistake. They had the previous year's information for one of the schools. They corrected it, so everything should be fine. So here we are now into this, I would say, budget year where we are using what was just passed from the referendum. And lo and behold, 200 Fisher Drive comes up as a topic, which apparently was supposed to be discussed for a long, long time, but never surfaced during the budget process before or during, but came up after that, suddenly looking for money based on the nearly $8 million that the town council and the Board of Finance raided the taxpayers. When I say raided, I think you know what I'm talking about. Nearly a $6 million tax increase and almost $4 million based on what you needed to have the reserves going from 10 to 13 to 15%. So now 200 Fisher Drive, I'm trying to understand the dynamics of this whole thing. And at the last meeting, I had said, hey, there wasn't enough information for me because we didn't see the presentation, and hopefully that we can get some more information. Dr. Carmanola had invited me to contact her after the referendum if I had any questions. But when it comes time for 200 Fisher Drive, she has not responded to one email, not one question. And my request was very simple. I'm trying to understand the dynamics and logistics of everything. How many people are in central office? I don't want names. I don't want payroll. I don't want anything. How many people? What are their titles? What do they do? And the question is for me, is there an opportunity for consolidation from some of the other schools for some of these roles? Is there an opportunity for decentralizing and pushing some of those roles out to where they probably should be amongst the schools rather than in central cubicles or offices? And I'm not for spending almost $4 million for a new building and a private bathroom. I mean, I think it's outrageous. What about the opportunities for shared services? How about combining the HR and the finance departments? Nobody's ever talked about that. How about shared services maybe with another district, similar to what regional schools doing with some of these key positions? Nobody's talked about that. And nobody has talked about any of the other alternatives for space that may be available. Maybe it's not right here and it's not perfect, but 200 Fisher Drive is a very big office complex. I've been there, I know what it's all about. You got space to put a couple of hundred people in there. And yeah, are we gonna be landlords? What kind of liability we're gonna have? But then I get concerned when we talk about, well, we have room for future planning or future space. Well, what kind of future space and planning should we be aware of? Are you gonna move all of town hall over there? I understand that the student population is stagnant, it's not growing. Now, here we get Brandon's newsletter again. You have 19 new employees here in town. I didn't see any retirements. I saw some transfers, some promotions, and you had almost 19 new employees for the Board of Ed. Where is the savings? Where's the efficiency? Where's the consolidation? When there's no growth anywhere else except, the money that they want out of our pockets as taxpayers. I think it's outrageous. And the Board of Finance is a statutory board, not necessarily a charter board. If you look at the charter, it says, when you look at the Board of Finance, you're referring to state statute. You come under the state statutes,
Right.
not the town council. You need to separate your powers and you need to say no. You need to be aggressive. No is no, and don't let them do what they think they should be doing. You have to stop this tax and spending. You are killing this town and you are killing the people that can't afford to live here.
Okay, I appreciate your
Thank you.
comment. Usually, historically, we've tended not to respond, but I usually prefer to respond. And there's some allocation here of who gets to answer what questions. In terms of, you should be able to pull from the budget from the Board of Ed as to what staffing they have. That's up to them. We can't tell them, get rid of this position, get rid of that position, because we only can say, here's the dollars, they get to choose how to spend it. We will ultimately have a full presentation on 200 Fisher Drive. And that isn't at this meeting, but it's probably going to be soon. Probably, Tom, November?
Yeah, well, we have
did have a
a full
small one.
presentation. There is, on the critical path timeline, we are anticipating a special town meeting on December 10th. The town council should have it on the agenda to recommend
Right.
appropriation and authorization for bonding.
And then we'll have to do
And
the
then the
same.
Board of Finance would receive that recommendation.
Right.
Yeah.
So at that
In
point,
November.
we will have a full-fledged presentation about that, and we'll try and make sure that you have answers to all your questions. I can tell you from a past experience that the old Towpath School, which is now the central office, is old, and that's a problem.
I heard, yeah, there are issues in what they have, and I don't think I would want an employee working in that building, but what are the alternatives? But there's no feedback coming back from the superintendent at all.
Well, we will certainly have.
Would it take 60 seconds just to kind of add to that?
Let me just finish. We'll certainly have the superintendent here to make a final pitch.
Yep.
And the town manager, who's ill tonight, will explain that there is, based upon the exploration they did, there is no other readily available space, and they think that this is reasonably available space. There will be some revenue to offset it, but Go ahead, take an extra minute or so.
So just one final note. On the September 11th meeting, I was at the town council meeting, and I just thought it was odd, but it was very disturbing for the chairman to sit up there and to tell the public that he is not going to open up the town charter, and he is not going to be here to sit here until 10, 11, or 12 at night working over budgets because of failures from the budget referendums. And as a former Board of Finance chair and a town committee chair for many years in another town, I found that just highly disgusting to have that position when that individual works for the legislative body. His role as a civic servant and anybody else that serves on these boards is to do what you took the oath to do. If you can't stand the heat, get out of the kitchen. If you don't want to do that during the budget process, get out. You cannot be a Hitler. That's Nazism, in my opinion. You cannot do
God.
us. It's up to us to provide the direction by the votes. So, but now you're going to have a town meeting for 200 Fisher Drive at some time.
Yes,
Well, you don't need 9% at that meeting, do you? And you didn't need it for the fire trucks, did you? You don't need it for any of these other votes when you go to a town meeting, but you need it for a referendum,
correct.
which is bad. That charter needs to be opened up, and that ordinance needs to be rescinded because it is undemocratic. And as far as I'm concerned, I think it's illegal what they're doing.
Okay.
And in my opinion, it should be limited to 0.5% for the town and 0.5% for the Board of Ed if you have 3 failures. Or you stay at last year's. That's what it is for most towns. Well, I know you got to pay police and teachers and everything else. Well, that's fine. That's not our problem. You consolidate. You come up with efficiencies, cut costs, cut these 19 positions that just hired with no growth in the town at all. It's outrageous. It's
Got
a
it.
tax and spend business here. That's what this is.
All right, thanks, Jim, appreciate it. All right.
We have another member of the audience on.
Oh, are you here to make comments?
Yes, please.
Ah, all right. Since we now have a second person, I will try to hold you to the 3 minutes.
Kathy Randall, 135 Northington Drive. I missed Jim's earlier comments, but I had a few comments on 200 Fisher Drive as well. I had submitted a cash flow to the town council a couple of weeks ago, and I just feel like we're taking on a big liability here. Why become a landlord when we could lease? So why don't we just lease Fisher Drive? And I did a cash flow. I assumed a 15-year cash flow, and I compared taking out the bond at, I made some assumptions, 60, 80 basis points over the treasury, and I compared it to a rental option. And you're putting in something like $625,000 of tenant improvements. Normally, when you have a long-term lease, a developer picks up many of those permanent improvements. So
Actually, I'd correct you. Normally, they don't. They amortize it over the cost of the loan, of the lease term.
well, they will pay for tenant improvements. When
Yes, but then they charge you for it in the rent. They build it back into the rent.
It's all part of a negotiation, depending upon.
No, I can tell you that that's what they do.
Okay, well, I financed a lot of commercial real estate, so I've seen many, many leases in my tenure. I'll get you many if you want it, but be that as it may, it's all part of a negotiation. And I just feel like when you compare that and you do an opportunity cost analysis, that if over the 15 years, you'd save opportunity cost wise $3.5 million versus having a building that you paid $2.2 million for plus put in $800,000. I really don't think it's going to be worth that much, a 52-year-old building, especially given where the commercial real estate market is. So, I mean, the other thing is you're looking to float this bond when you just have $3 million left over from the prior year. You're going to pay $60,000 in soft costs for this bond. That just seems like a total waste. And then you're not even going to get a tax exempt rate if you're looking at the multi-tenant building. To Jim's point earlier, I feel like there's a little bit of like bait and switch. We get the presentation and it says you're going to, the Board of Ed's going to take 12,000 square feet, but it looks like they're operating in 6,000 now because the basement is not able to be used. So they're basically doubling their space. And if they're using some of that space for storage files, that seems like an expensive use of that space. I mean, if it's just storing files, we should go put it somewhere in a storage facility for much less than either paying or renting space. But I just see a lot of things here that they just don't make sense. And if it's going to be a multi-tenant building, then you should present it to the town as, yes, we're gonna have, 100,000 or whatever the rental income is. But then don't say 2 months later, oh, now we're gonna move town offices there, and now we're gonna give the Board of Ed another 5,000 square feet. And also, nothing's been said about whether you're gonna monetize the building over here. The existing building, I mean, that's been appraised by the town at over a couple $2 million. So if you don't monetize that building, then this becomes like a $5 or $6 million expenditure. So it just seems like you could get a couple million for that. We got $3 million on the balance sheet. Why, and then we're going out to float a bond. That doesn't make sense to me. And
Okay,
I just feel like
your time's up, so if you could,
Okay, if you have steady, reliable payments for rent as opposed to taking on liability, you're gonna need a new roof, you're gonna need a new elevator in that building. It just seems to me to be a much better risk to rent versus buy. And I feel like you really need to present to the taxpayers what you're actually going to do with all of these things. Is it gonna be multi-tenant or is it gonna be single tenant? Are you gonna sell this or are you not gonna sell it? And I think the whole thing, every aspect of the deal should be presented to the voters before they hand vote. So I hope I
Got
got
it.
all that in 3 minutes.
thank you. Well, not quite, but there you go. All right, communication from members. I know that Kathleen, you sort of had a hit list of things you would like to
A
cover.
couple things.
So let's ask them out because I think we can tell some of them.
Yes, I hope we can.
And if I don't know, I'm sure Tom will know the
On
answer.
page 3, you had asked about the lien on the prime mortgage. And Brandon said he was unsure about how that was gonna work. And he find out, did he get a chance to get back to you?
He hasn't, now that I think about it. Tom, do you know if the tenant relocation lien has been placed on Avon Wood Road?
It hasn't been placed yet, but it will be shortly. We're anticipating placing those liens this week.
Okay, and when you say liens plural, what's the anticipated, what is being liened?
What do you mean, what properties?
Well, no, I understand it's 44 Avon Wood Road,
Mhm.
but there's a lien for the part with the tenants covering their
Relocation costs?
relocation costs and that sort of stuff.
Yeah,
And so what else is being liened, for?
so it's the relocation costs as well as the temporary relocation expenditures associated with hotel stays. And I have a figure, I think it's about $328,000, although correct me if I'm wrong, is that not the entire?
No, there's still more to come.
Yeah, there's more to come, but the liens will be placed
The
in.
second lien is there's private tenants or
Mhm.
private owners, so that's one of the other liens that's.
So there's still private owners, because I know it was a condo building. Got it. That's interesting. All right. Next question.
Okay, so then, Tom, you talked about the capital projects that had full
Yep.
balances left over. So those are capital projects that are completed, but you intend to take the money and put it back in the general fund. We have lots of capital projects coming up. I just wonder why you wouldn't put it into a capital fund.
Oh.
We have that.
Let me also sort of jump in, because I know a little bit
Okay.
about that. That they went through and looked at post the September 23 meeting and pulled up everything that just, because the total allocation of stuff that was in prior projects
Mhm.
was higher than expected. And they found that no one had gone through and said, okay, this project, there's $4,000 left over. So they went through and pulled all of those and now have a report that allow them to find it. So there is, I don't know what the number is, Tom, you probably do. That all of those monies have been for projects that were well over, like by way of example, the high school edition, the last high school edition.
Yeah.
There was some stuff there that
Accumulated.
was overlooked.
Yeah, I mean, there's some stuff that accumulated in the balance of the capital project funds for projects or in relation to projects that have been completed over the course of several years. And so your question is more along the lines of, well, why not leave them in the capital projects fund, like leave these?
Yeah, like last year, at the end of the year, you created a $500,000 capital reserve fund.
Yep.
So
Well, that's,
If
so
it's a
that's not,
capital, if this is capital money, why is it going to the general fund instead of back to a capital fund? That's my question.
so the capital reserve, it's not technically a fund, it's an assignment. So it's a sort of, it's a
Okay,
reserve,
so
but
then-
yeah.
Then why isn't this going to be assigned capital rather than,
Well, for the
I mean,
sake
we-
of not
we have
putting
that.
a restriction on the funds, and given the nature of how they
but
wound
that's,
up.
but we, the taxpayers, put this money in as capital project money, and now it's being put into the general fund,
Right.
which has already gone from 10% to 15% of our
Mhm.
expenditures. So that pot just keeps getting bigger and bigger.
True, but now, to your point, the taxpayers approved the use of those funds for certain specific capital projects that are now completed. By returning the funds back to the general fund, you increase your unassigned fund balance, and you make those funds part of your overall reserve. For future capital projects, it would be anticipated that the town would seek approval from the taxpayers for approval for those designated capital projects.
And would we seek them to come out of the general fund and transfer back to the capital fund for a capital project, or is that?
That's
not how it
generally
works?
how it works, yeah.
Okay.
If you look at the budget process, specifically, if you take a look at tab R of the budget document, there's a good breakdown of all the capital projects that are being requested as part of the annual budget and where their sources are coming from. And the majority of those projects are funded through the general fund.
Okay.
So what happens is there's an appropriation from the general fund. It gets transferred into one of the capital project funds, and then it's utilized for the designated project. If there's anything left over when the project is completed, we've generally transferred those funds back to the general fund. That's not specific just to the general fund. The sewer fund would do the same thing for sewer projects as well.
I think you've got a third question.
Yeah, 2 more.
Oh, 2 more.
So you had a little lead question. Did you follow up?
I
on
did
that?
indeed. It's been over a month and Brandon indicated that he would have a conversation with the president of Avon Little League. So I'd like to know if that occurred.
I'm
I
not
can't
sure.
speak to that,
I can't
sure.
answer that.
And then.
Put that down on your list to follow up
So
next time.
we talk about these things and we make comments and then they just go into the ether.
No,
Happens quite often.
That's,
I will make a notation of it.
make a notation. We'll make sure we'll cover it during members' questions.
Thank you.
and my mistake, my fourth one was on Fisher Drive, and I think it's been beaten to death, so we're good with that. Thank you very much for your time.
All right. So does anyone else have communications?
I just have something, short and sweet for this meeting anyway, but I happened to see that our colleagues in Canton had a tri-board meeting a week ago to level set the budget for the coming year. And so they were saying that the process was to face the public, go out and say, look, this is what we see that we have to do right now in order to just maintain what we're doing now. And I know that we do that internally in Avon, and each board will do, like the town side does it and the Board of Ed does it. But I wanted to say, I really thought that was an intriguing concept to do it
Sounds
at the
great.
beginning of the process, not have the workshop at the end after everything's, I mean, you can still have it at the end, but
That makes
one of
more
my
sense.
problems with having it at the end is that it's all done. Everything's been decided and you're looking at cuts, or it's just very, it seems almost backwards. So I just wanted to mention that as something that I would love to get a read on from our board. People think it's a good idea, something we want to look into. And the other point was that because they had a similar situation to ours where their budget voted down twice, and then they did get an approval, but they wanted to do something different. And I think that this is a message to do something different here as well, because our budget just failed. I mean, it never got approved until the council approved it. So, regardless of what the reason was, I think bringing the public along is always a good idea in my view.
All right, I will follow on with some conversations with the town manager.
Thank you.
I think that's great.
I
Thank
concur.
you.
Gary, do you have any questions? Everybody else does.
I do not.
Don't forget Micah.
Mike is.
Oh, Micah,
Yeah.
you have any questions you'd like to ask?
No, I don't.
Okay. All right, next item. Finance Director's Report, monthly financial report. Take it away, Tom.
All right, and I'll go through all the items here under the report, starting with the September 2024 monthly financial report. Not a whole lot here that's different from what we've discussed over the last couple of months with regards to fiscal year 2025. You can see the current levy collections are still a little lagging when compared to this point in time last year. And that could probably be attributed to the fact that the bills went out late, and it just kind of pushes things back a little bit as far as delinquent statement, sending those out and collecting on delinquent amounts. Having said that, we're not overly concerned with the progress there, and we anticipate catching back up. Overall, you can see that we're at 51% of the total levy recognized as revenue at this point in time, which is in line with our historic expectations, a little lower than where we were at this point in time last year, but no cause for concern there. And I think another item that we've talked about quite a bit is an increase to the other local revenues line item, which is kind of forcing that percentage number down a little bit. As far as expenditures, again, trending in a similar way to the way they've been for the last couple of months. Pretty much in line with expectations. A couple of things to note. You'll see 69% of the health and social services budget has been used as of this point in time. That's directly related to the Avon Place URAA obligations. And then taking a look at the miscellaneous line item, as is the case every year, one of the larger expenditure items included in that line item would be for municipal insurance, the liability, auto and property insurance. We pay that on a quarterly basis. So the second quarter was paid prior to the end of September, which is increasing that percentage to almost 50%. But that's not indicative of anything outside the norm. That's just a timing related issue. And then the second page just serves to show, the graphs indicate how consistent the expenditure data is by category, as well as the property tax and assessment collections. On a year-to-year basis, we're pretty much right in line with where you expect to be. The volatility generally shows up when you take a look at some of those other revenue categories, specifically other local revenues. And so with that, I'll conclude the monthly report. If anyone has any questions about that, I'd be happy to answer them.
Brian, just
One comment or possibly a request.
Mhm.
Could you add a column after the total appropriation to have a fiscal year 2025 activity to date and put the dollars alongside that as well? Because it might be.
Oh, 2024. So
No, just 2025 for the appropriation. Yeah, so you have the total appropriation of 108 mil,
Yep.
right? And then you have the activity to date of 55.
Mhm.
If you could have the total appropriation for fiscal year 2025, we could see how close we are.
Oh, I
From a
see.
dollar perspective.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. Like
So
have
break
it
it down like
like
this is 3 months.
extrapolated by.
Correct,
3
by
months.
month. I mean, I
Yeah.
don't know if it's
Okay.
straight lined, I don't
Monthly.
know if it goes like this, I don't know if it goes like that, but it'd just be
You mean the run rate? Like where?
foretelling, yeah, just year-to-date actuals, as opposed to sort of this is the grand appropriation,
Right, so it
And
should
this
be
is
20, we should be showing
what the-
25% of it because
essentially what the
it's only
budget
3
is.
months.
actual budget dollars for the next, what is it, July, August, September,
Mhm.
3 months.
3 months.
Okay.
To align with that,
Yeah, let me take a
to
look
align
at
with that 55 million, because I think there might be enough space if you sort of shrink the,
Yeah, I see. Yeah,
Account
account category
category,
has it's a lot of blank space there.
and to be the same on that first set there and the next,
Mhm.
if you would.
Okay.
Just play
Yeah,
with it and see if
I'll play around with
Okay.
that and see if
Thank
we
you.
can make a revision.
Thanks
Yeah.
very much.
Oh, no problem.
further questions?
I just have a question about the pilot thing. So
Oh,
I
yeah.
know when we talked about the apartment complexes you want to put on, Security Drive around the corner. Security, we talked about that last year and it's not happening yet, but I know that they're gonna have a pilot. Is this for any particular thing, the pilot?
The pilot grant, yeah, so this is, you're talking about the
one that's on
revenue, the
here.
87,000?
Yeah,
Yeah, so that's a grant from the state, and that is to make up for properties that are not taxable within town. So like any state-owned property or, I don't think we have any university or college-owned property, but if there are properties in town that we cannot collect property tax from, the state makes up the difference through a grant. The
okay,
grant is formula-driven, and then it is part of a tiered program. So there's a formula for the amount that would be due to every municipality. But you don't necessarily get 100% of what that formula says you're going to get, depending on what tier you fall under.
okay,
Avon, I believe, is a tier 3 town, which means we get, I think it comes out to about 33% of what the formula would dictate. And that's based on the equalized net grand list per capita.
thank you.
So we get 33 cents on the dollar, essentially in forms of a rebate versus
Yeah,
100 cents on
I
the
know
dollar.
it's on the dollar, but
There's a
yeah.
tax paying entity.
Yeah, we get, there's a reduction in the amount that we get from the state to make up for that lost revenue based on the fact that we fall under that tier.
Thanks.
And do you know why it's more than it was budgeted? Did this,
It's just timing of when we have the figures available. So I think the budget figure is probably based on the actual amount that we received in the preceding year, or it may be based on what the state's budget was for the preceding year. It's kind of tough to hit the nail on the head with that because the state is going through the budget process, their budget process, at a similar time as when we are. And sometimes we don't have the final figures when we're coming up with our projections.
thank you.
All right. Oh, Harry, go ahead.
Tom, ECS, Special Education Excess Cost, and open choice, and open choice.
Mhm.
Do those funds get appropriated by the legislature in the next state budget process?
What do you mean, in terms of like their biannual process?
Well, yeah, it says grant revenue recognized, and we haven't recognized the revenue yet. So I'm wondering, when does the state, or when do we get that revenue, or when does the?
Usually August.
That's late.
Okay, so it is after the session.
Yes, yeah, the revenue should come in throughout the year. And then the appropriation, I think they appropriate the funds in advance. Open choice and excess cost, I don't think we'll know exactly what the number is gonna be because it's dependent upon number of enrollments, and excess cost is dependent upon the amount of special education
placements.
costs. So those, I think the state has appropriations that have been approved, but the way it's gonna get divvied up to municipalities is not determined yet. The ECS figure is appropriated, and I think we'll see 3 installments over the course of the year, by which time we'll receive the entire amount.
Okay, so ECS, we will get that number.
It's anticipated. I mean, I can't guarantee it because I know there've been years where the state legislature has cut figures that they had already appropriated, but that number is based on the appropriated amount. I believe we made that change in the first post-referendum budget workshop. We had increased that figure because we recognized that the state had increased the appropriation.
Thank you.
Yep.
All right, discussion of year-end financials.
All right, so I'll shift over to that discussion. As you know, from the past couple of months, I've been providing updates on the year end for fiscal year 2024 and anticipated year-end transactions that we will be making formally to the town council at their next meeting on November 7th. And then presuming the council were to approve those transactions, I would anticipate that they will be with you for your November meeting. And so I'll go through and I'll recap what we've already discussed. And I also have an additional transaction to add that we haven't previously discussed. So as far as overall budgetary results, and just from a timing perspective, yeah, I think it's safe to say we've reached a point where these figures are final unaudited figures. So the auditors are on site doing their field work. We expect that they'll be done by the end of the week, but then there'll be a wrap-up phase whereby they'll give us a draft financial statement and propose any potential journal entries. Until then, we won't have final audited figures, but at least as of right now, I can speak to the figures that are finalized in advance of the audit. General fund budgetary results for the year amount to revenues in excess of expenditures of about $3.4 million. We talked about a lot of those drivers over the course of the past several months. Interest income being a primary one, in addition to intergovernmental grant revenue and some savings on the expenditure line items. That positive operating result would then be utilized to satisfy certain year-end transactions, similar to those that we proposed in previous years. I'll go through the ones that we've already discussed and recap them. One of them being a transfer to the compensated absences fund of about $100,000. We already spoke a little bit about the transfers back to the general fund of residual equity from the capital funds. That amounts to about $1.5 million. So that would be an increase to the general fund balance. And then there were a number of assignments that we discussed. One of them being $200,000 for pension contributions, $150,000 for OPEB contributions, $1.25 million for subsequent year budget use, and that is to make up for the use of unassigned fund balance that was approved in the process of approving the fiscal year 2025 budget.
I'm sorry, could you repeat that one?
Yeah, sure. $1.25 million. You'll recall that for the fiscal year 25 budget, we used $1.25 million to balance the budget. We used it as a non-tax levy revenue source. So with the positive results from fiscal year 24, we would like to replenish that $1.25 million. And then we also talked about an assignment for Avon Place for the URAA obligations, and the amount of that is $200,000. And we also, sorry, I neglected this one, capital asset replacement assignment in the amount of about $44,000. So we talked about all of those. The amounts haven't changed. We've also talked about an assignment for road improvements. That's a typical year-end transaction. The amount that we are recommending for that is $1,975,000. And finally, the last transaction that we haven't discussed to this point is a recommended transfer to the Medical Claims Internal Service Fund of $400,000. And so I can give you a little bit of background on that. You'll recall that over the last couple of fiscal years, we have transferred residual amounts at the end of fiscal year into the Medical Claims Fund. And now that is to account for the fact that we've had some claims history that is negative, where that Medical Claims Fund is paying out more than it's taking in. We've identified the issue associated with that over the course of a few years, and each year we are budgeting more and more to put into that fund to get to a situation where the revenues in that fund are more than adequate to cover the expenditures. As we went through fiscal year 2024, claims data was much more improved relative to the revenue that was headed into that fund. There was no indication that we would need to make a year-end transfer. However, when reviewing the August 2024 claims information, we noticed some negative claims experience, primarily driven by a couple of pretty significant claims. We're going to receive pretty significant reimbursements from our stop loss insurance carrier for those individual claims. But based on that negative activity, we thought it would be appropriate to go back and revisit recommendations made by our health insurance consultants regarding an adequate balance in the medical claims fund. So we discussed this back in November and December of last year. Our health insurance consultants had made a recommendation that your medical claims fund should consist of a couple of different pieces. Number one, it should have a claim reserve, which amounts to 1.5 months worth of the preceding year's claims, annual claims.
1.5?
1.5 months.
Month, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay.
Yes. What did you think it was?
1.5 years.
Oh, 1.5 years, no. No,
I don't really want to have to do CPR on Harry, thank you.
The other component is a claim margin, which would consist of an additional 10% of the preceding fiscal year's annual claims. When we took a look at and evaluated those two components to the recommended balance, we found that as of August 31st, 2024, if we didn't do anything, we'd be about $400,000 short. So we thought it would be prudent to recommend a transfer at the end of fiscal year 2024 from the positive operating results that we've recognized into the medical claims fund to get us in a situation where, you know, we've built that balance up to the recommended level.
Okay, so all things we're gonna see again in the future.
Yes, yeah. this
And
is-
we'll approve it, this is just for our information.
Right, there's no action necessary. It has to go to the council. We're gonna bring a formal presentation and a formal booklet. You'll be familiar with the year-end transaction booklet that you received in previous fiscal years. We'll put that together, present it to the council next week. You'll get it for your November meeting. We did want to make sure to give the Board of Finance some time to at least hear what our plans were and give some consideration to those transactions.
Okay, we do apparently, and I overlooked it, have the proposed acquisition of 200 Fisher Drive. Do you have anything additional to say other than what we? Well,
Could I make a comment just prior to jumping?
sure,
into another-
sorry, I thought we were done.
Sorry. I just added up quickly, so 200K for pension, $150 for OPEB,
1.25 for your.
1.25 for retirement, 200K for Avon Place, what is this, 44 grand for the capital, $1,975,000, and then 400 med. I think that adds to around 4.2. And you said that excess was 3.4?
4, yeah.
Yeah, but keep in mind, we have the 1.564 coming back from the capital project funds as well. And I think I had the 100,000
Oh,
transfer.
so going back into the,
Yes, that's coming back.
got it,
Oh,
okay.
so these two things are in addition to the 3.4? The 100,000 from the absences and the 1.5 from the capital?
Yeah, sounds like it.
Okay, that's what we didn't do. We didn't add this.
Is there any reason why we're writing this down instead of Garrett giving it to us? I mean, if you're gonna share it with us, why wouldn't you put it in the report so we can at least look at it? I mean, otherwise we have to furiously write everything down and then try to,
That's
Do what they
4.1.
just-
I could send something out.
thank you.
Yeah.
I mean, that
Or
would be
we'll certainly
nice.
have the report for
But
next time.
I did have one question. At the
Yeah.
beginning of the whole medical claims fund discussion, you said you had identified the issue. What was the issue?
The overarching issue. So you'll recall that we talked about the way that we fund the medical claims fund. We're self-insured, so we have a separate fund where the fund receives contributions from employees and from both the town and Board of Ed for employer contribution amounts. Those contributions are based on rates that are recommended by our health insurance consultant. A number of years ago, our consultant, a newer consultant at the time, recognized that the rates that we were using to determine those amounts were not adequate.
Okay,
And so we recognized that we needed to increase those rates. But in order to do so without having an incredibly drastic increase just at one time, we built a plan whereby we would phase those rate increases in over the course of a 5-year period of time, which we're in the process of doing.
and then the 400,000 is really because of negative claim experience.
Yeah, negative claim, but like the overarching issue is the, the fact that the revenues aren't adequate to cover the claims cost. And August 2024 in particular, there were some negative claims that kind of pushed us to a point where in evaluating what the balance of that medical claims fund was at that particular point in time, we felt that we were short.
So it doesn't meet the benchmarks that you set,
Right, without the $400,000 transfer.
but just, you're getting money back from stop loss though?
Yes,
When does that come in?
that should be coming in the next couple of weeks.
And you'll still need 400,000?
Yeah, that was factored into the analysis.
So when you have a year where you have a $400,000 deficit, how do you look at what the employees are gonna contribute for the next year? Because this is all claims driven.
Yep, yeah, so we'll meet with our insurance consultant. They'll look at historic data, they'll look at industry trends, and they'll look to any potential changes in the plans, and they'll come up with a projection for the future. And they'll make a recommendation for what we should budget, what rates we should utilize to budget for the upcoming fiscal year. Negative claims experience would, in all likelihood, result in their recommendation being an increase, which is something that we do anticipate because we're not quite to the point where our rates are fully adequate to cover the claims that have been recommended in the past. I anticipate that for the fiscal year 2026 budget, at least based on the 5-year planning cycle that we adhered to, that we should be in a place for fiscal year 26 where we are adopting rates to fund the insurance claims that are equitable or in parity with the anticipated claims experience.
Could I make one more comment on the excess 3.4 million? So that's pretty sure, like,
Yes, yeah, now, I think it's safe, that's what I mean by final unaudited.
got it.
So the
They have to
auditors,
make any
yeah, like if they make
adjustments.
adjustments, then that's something that I can't foresee. But these are the figures that I could say are more or less final, dependent on anything that they do
Got it.
or that they recommend.
And so if we just harken back a few months ago to the budget and all the comments around the budget that we're rating, the different funds, 200,000 in the pension, $150 in OPEB, and then $1,250,000 in retirement, all that's going, that we cut from the budget, all that's going back right in, correct?
Yeah, so that 150,000 would be utilized as part of the
To replenish
upcoming
what
budget
was
to
cut.
to at least increase the OPEB contribution relative to the amount that came out of the general fund for fiscal year 2025.
So let me just go on record that all the hyperbole, all the rhetoric about we're rating all these funds is exactly how I thought it would play out. Roughly $3 million in excess interest on reserves going to be funded right back in.
Okay, now the next item, the question is proposed acquisition of 200 Fisher Drive. In light of our previous conversation, do you have anything to say?
Not much more to say other than you have the critical path timeline. The town council will be taking action at their next meeting, and then you can anticipate a recommendation on your agenda for the November meeting. Target for the special town meeting is December 10th.
And the Avon Place Condominium Uniform Relocation Act, nothing further to add on that, I assume.
No, we discussed the liens that are being placed and that, we've accumulated costs of about $382,000 to this point. But nothing more to add other than that.
All right, we're done under old business. We've nothing under old business. New business, senior center HVAC replacement and community room improvements. So transfers of 66,000 and supplemental appropriations from ARPA. So I would like to entertain a motion you don't have to read it, in accordance with the previously distributed motion. We have someone move that, and we'll put all the magic words in minutes for you. Someone like to move or no?
I'm
I'm
unsure.
sorry, Houston, could you repeat that one more time?
We're talking about 24/25-05, Senior Citizen Center HVAC replacement and community room improvements. A draft resolution has been presented to us to accomplish that. So it's 66,000 transfer of appropriations and a supplemental appropriation of ARPA. So it is,
Yeah, move to approve.
all right. And we will insert the full language. Do we have a second?
Second.
All right. Any questions?
I'm just on the motion, just trying to. It says 25,000. What does it say? 66.
Yeah, you want me to elaborate?
It's
Yeah.
41,000 plus 25. I think
Yeah.
that works
Oh, all
out to
right, where's the
66.
41? I don't see it in the motion. Oh, there it is. There it is, I see it now. Never mind.
Yes, yeah, sorry, it's a.
It's coming from two different places is what you're saying.
Exactly, yeah,
Okay.
and the reason that it, I mean, one thing that complicates it a little more than it needs to be is that we have two different, funding buckets. There's the ARPA funding, which we want to keep separate from everything else.
Right,
And then there's another bucket in Fund 2. And so because we couldn't
so-
just accumulate everything into one account, it's kind of, there's a couple different things happening within one resolution.
all right, so what's happening, because the way it's written on the agenda, it looks like that it's a transfer of appropriation of 66.
Mhm.
Is this 41,280 in ARPA already been appropriated?
It's been appropriated for a different project,
Okay,
but that project is not ready to move any
Proceed.
further, and we have to
Okay.
obligate ARPA funds by
Right,
December
okay.
31st.
This paragraph
yeah,
and,
and this other one,
This
yeah.
paragraph.
Okay, gotcha. Okay.
okay.
Can I just ask a question about this project? Because when I read through this whole thing a couple times, the HVAC, it looks like was originally there was appropriation for $140,000 to replace it. But then you put out an RFP, and one of them suggested that we move from the gas-fired furnace to a variable refrigerant flow system. And I just want to understand how, there's a huge difference in the price here. What were the projected savings in energy costs per year between the two systems?
I don't have projected savings figures. I know because the project has to be designed. And until it goes through the design phase, there's no formal savings figure.
Yeah, but when you go to buy a furnace, they tell you this is how efficient it is and how much it's gonna cost to run it. You know how many square feet the senior center is, and the people who gave you these proposals should have been able to tell you that. Here's your gas-fired furnace, how much it's gonna cost to run it. Here's this new fancy one, here's how much you're gonna save. The little stickers are on your refrigerator when you go to the appliance store, even telling you how much it's gonna cost. So I find that a little difficult to believe. So I just wonder, how much money are we gonna save every year between these two systems? And I'm guessing this is it's run by electricity? The other one was run by natural gas?
I don't wanna
Okay.
speak to something I don't know. I'm not
That's my
sure.
guess. Somewhere in here, it talks about
Right,
being
so-
a heat pump. I have a heat pump in my house
Yep.
because I got a room that doesn't get heated by my central system, which runs on natural gas, which is very efficient and very clean. And so, I just have a problem with this whole thing, not knowing those kind of answers, why we made the jump from 140 to the other one. And I understand that the total cost of the project includes lighting and a ceiling and a sound system. I get all that. But that's not really broken down here of what those separate costs are. well, we're all going ho to spend almost $400,000 on this, so I think there's a lot of questions.
Couldn't agree more.
So, yeah, I mean, I do have a breakdown of the different costs. The HVAC project is anticipated to cost about $337,000. Ceiling, about $28,000, and the rest is for the LED lighting.
So
But
337.
where's the sound system?
Sound system is, that's separate, that's the $90,000, right?
Yeah, 89.
Yeah, that's
They-
that's kind of a separate project.
How much was the lighting?
Lighting,
It is, I'm just trying to, in my own mind, compare the $140 to the 337.
Right, well, the
Can I
budget
have a couple words?
was just the furnace. How much was the lights?
lights, 3,400.
Thank you.
I think Mike has got a question. I'll give him the floor.
Thank you. I just wanted to make a couple comments. Yes, heat pumps are electric, and natural gas is not considered a clean energy.
Then why are we running buses on them? I mean, we don't need to discuss that.
All right, so let me try your minds. Do you care to vote on this, or do you have an issue? And if we could just have a vote, so discussion. Brian, you look
I'm not,
uncomfortable.
yes, I'm not in favor of the appropriation because I think we ought to go back to the initial tradesman quote of $140,000.
Okay, Kathleen, where are you coming from?
In lieu of the fact that we don't have the information about the efficiency of the systems and the breakdown, I intend to agree.
Okay, Harry?
Well, I'm trying to figure out how we go from how we have this new business for 66 out of transfers, 126 from ARPA,
Right,
that goes over 140, and then we've got 371 as the new spend. Where does that difference get covered? Are we suggesting that where are we suggesting we get the other funds, and do we need to approve an appropriation for the total cost and understand what's going into the total spend?
So the way that it would be funded is there's already about $140,000 appropriated for the senior center HVAC system.
Okay.
You add on to that, $41,280 from the Building 1 flood prevention appropriation. There is an
Okay,
additional,
so how do we go from flood appropriation to,
so that's an ARPA project that was appropriated a long time ago. I think it was in 2022.
That's the
Along with the 140?
It was designed, the idea was that Nod Brook, just outside of this building, we have been having issues with Nod Brook overflowing, and we were looking for ways to address that. Part of the solution was to dredge the brook, which was done. So originally that was a $50,000 appropriation, and part of that was used to dredge the brook. There was some consideration for the potential to build a wall along the brook so that there could be, you prevent flood damage from affecting the Avon room as it had done a couple of years ago. But we're not in a place where we're ready to move forward with anything like that, and the situation appears to be stable. We have to obligate ARPA funds by December 31st of this year. Otherwise, you lose the funds and owe them back to the federal government. So that's why we identified that funding source as one that should be reallocated for another purpose.
all right.
So
that's 180,000.
Right, and then there's a project account for senior center improvements that has $47,480, and we are proposing transferring $25,158 into that balance. And then the supplemental appropriation would be for $126,359. So that's an additional appropriation of ARPA funds.
so there's ARPA.
And I
Kathy,
can
any
say-
questions?
I'm just trying to figure out, so the total work is,
380, 215?
Yeah, when you add them all per the memo, it's
Per the memo at the
382.50.
bottom.
That's the funding that has been identified. And I can add, so I wasn't on the project team that evaluated the RFPs that came in. But in talking with some other town staff, the general sense is that the VRF system is going to use less energy than the traditional system due to efficient technology. The outdoor unit varies fan speeds and the amount of refrigerant delivered to indoor units to adjust to real-time conditioning. Demand fluctuates with occupancy and the system will fluctuate along with that. It's more precise, quieter operation. I don't have a whole lot more information. I know that the project team felt strongly that this would be a much more efficient option that would recoup savings over time. They couldn't come up with a formal return on investment analysis because the system hasn't been designed yet. There have been a couple instances where we installed systems like this in other locations, specifically in Countryside Park. And we did receive rebates that were pretty significant relative to the cost of those projects. So in Countryside Park, we spent about $43,000. We received a rebate of about $8,000. We did something similar for the Historical Society Museum. The cost was $22,000 and we received a rebate of about $6,000. So another consideration is the fact that we would likely earn a rebate as a result of the fact that we install this particular type of system as opposed to a gas boiler system.
But you
Okay,
have no idea what that is.
I don't have information on that. I know it will be based on the tonnage of the project. But I don't have anything exact and I can't quote any particular figures.
all right, just questioning. Micah, do you have any further questions?
Yeah, Tom, we had town staff make decisions on what type of system to design and put in place. And those town staff don't have a financial benefit to do anything but what is best for the town.
Yeah, that's correct.
Thank you.
All right. Absent further colloquy, I'm going to call for a vote. How many people are in favor of the resolution?
Aye.
2 in favor. How many people are opposed to the resolution? 4. Got it. All right. So it's defeated, no abstentions. I assume that if more information is provided, the matter could be reconsidered on the next agenda.
Absolutely.
Yep.
All right, so it's
Information on the new system and
Yep.
efficiency.
efficiencies and costs. So that's a, without prejudice, as we might say. Okay, audio-visual equipment for the senior center, ARPA supplemental appropriation, $90,000. Tom, would you like to address that?
Yeah, so, I mean, that's also discussed in the same memo. It's a little more straightforward. It's a straightforward appropriation of ARPA funds. And this board will know very well how the senior center community room does in terms of hosting large-scale meetings. Audio is not very good. We have not been able to host a hybrid meeting in that space. And so we would like to improve the AV in that space so that we could address those issues. And the memo goes into some detail on that. And again, you have a resolution that is a little more straightforward regarding improvements to that system.
All right, I would call for a motion in accordance with the draft resolution presented to us.
I would like to call the motion as it's written.
All right, do we have a second?
Sure.
All right. Any discussion on the community center AV equipment update?
Well, I would like to tell you that I participated in a webinar with the Connecticut Council of Municipalities about FOIA of all things. And they actually brought up, I think I sent it to you,
Yep.
that if we are offering the live audience the opportunity to speak, we must offer the online audience the same opportunity. And so we are actually not in compliance with that law. I think it's a law.
Oh, yeah, it's a law.
So, so I really feel strongly that this has to be addressed.
Good. All in favor? Aye. Mike, I didn't see how you voted.
He's muted.
He's what?
Yeah, I'm just so many questions about appropriation for HVAC, but no questions about a similar appropriation for AV. I find comical. Aye.
Well, all right. I'm glad you're amused, but your camera's off, so we can't see you. Are you voting in favor or against?
I just voted aye.
Thank you, sir. All right. Then we've got other business, letting people know in your package, they have the approved capital budget review schedule. So that's been distributed. Any other further business? All right, can I have a motion to withdraw? Withdraw. This, yeah, right. Adjourn.
We get it.
Yes.
Motion to adjourn.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Carries unanimously. We're taking that liberty, Micah.
Granted.
So now that you adjourned, question, where does electricity come from?
Where does electricity come
In
from?
this state, 60% of it comes from natural gas. Think of it about
Ooh, oh, can I go ahead since we're
This
talking
conference
about
will now be
the
recorded.
importance of moving infrastructure to electric because there are so many different sources of electric. But if you have infrastructure that relies on fossil fuel, which includes natural gas, then that doesn't afford any opportunity for improvement.